Welcome to Bridge Talk. My name is Matt Dorgan. I'm the founder of Building Bridges for Brianna. And we're going to change things up a little differently today. And I'm just going to give you an insight about how Building Bridges for Brianna was started and how mental health has impacted me from my early days growing up. I guess I really need to kind of start off saying, I was born and raised here in York, Pennsylvania. And back in 1998, I moved down to Key West, Florida. I went down there to go after a dream of being a marine engineer and working on boats. But ever since I was down there, I started doing a bunch of different other jobs. I did jet ski tour guides, which I want to say is probably one of the best ones I had. Every day going in board shorts, no t-shirt, flip-flops, being out in the water every day, it was great. But then as I started growing up, I learned I really need to get a real job, and do something else. So in the same time as I was dealing or going through the job as jet ski tour guide, I was also working in some nightclubs. And why I got into those nightclubs, I started meeting police officers, and it really kind of triggered my childhood dream of always wanting to be a police officer. Since I was a little kid, that's something I always wanted to do. So a lot of the officers down there really kind of helped me get into the police academy, which I attended in Key West, Florida. And it was great. Morning colors, right by the ocean, swimming in a pool, right in the Caribbean air. You couldn't ask for a better place to go to the academy and to be a police officer. But I had no idea really about mental health. And it was something that really kind of came on quickly, that I really learned about mental health. And then it also impacted me several years later. I remember being a police officer, going through FTO, not knowing anything about mental health. I lived down there for a couple of years, and I knew some people that had some mental health issues, but it never really impacted me to let me know how strong it was in the community and how prevalent and how many people actually have some sort of mental health condition. And it wasn't until while I was in FTO, we got a call to a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And as we get there, we were dispatched to the hospital to collect some evidence. So here I am walking in to the ER. I'm 23 years old, think I'm big, bad, and tough. Nobody can stop me. Nothing can knock me down. I was in probably the best shape of my life, at that point. And I walk into the ER. We open up the curtain, and there the person is that shot themselves. Just passed away a couple minutes before we got there, and his chest was wide open. They just got done working on him. And I had no idea what was about to hit me, but it hit me hard. My knees got weak. I was getting ready to fall over. I had no idea what I was experiencing at that time. Luckily one of the charge nurses at the hospital, her husband was a sergeant in our department, and she knew exactly what was going on. She's seen it multiple times and has grabbed me and actually sat me down, gave me a bottle of water, and we just started talking about it. And I had no idea, again, what I was experiencing, and it didn't dawn on me until a couple of years later that what I was actually experiencing at the time. And as soon as we got done talking, I went outside, talked to my FTO, and we started talking. I was like, man, I didn't realize why would somebody want to shoot themselves? I didn't understand, so we had conversations and started learning about it. And, I started kind of reaching out, asking for more information of why people would want to do this, and started learning about it. And then through my tenure down there at the police department, we've had multiple calls, that we would go to with, people cutting themselves or asking for help and saying they want to end their life. And I started realizing that mental health was a serious concern and a serious issue, and just trying to learn the other resources in the community down there, to send them to. It wasn't until several years later that I left the police department and left Key West and actually moved back home and actually moved to Reading, Pennsylvania. And while I was there, it was a couple months after I moved back home, I received a call from a good friend of mine down there, and she calls me and asks me if I was sitting down and tells me, and this is when mental health really hit hard. Turned out one of my best friends, Keith, ended his life the night before. We really had no idea anything was bothering him and had no idea that he was struggling with mental health. It wasn't until he was alone in his house that he pulled out his service weapon, and took his life. And that's when I realized again that, man, it can impact anybody. Here's people that are out risking their life every day, seeing things every day that most people do not, but we need to get them help as well because they need it as much as everybody else. The big bad, like me, 23 years old, big bad and tough, can be impacted. And that's following that is when I started having some flashbacks of things that were going on in my law enforcement days. I was hit by a car. We've had some traumatic incidences and cases that I was involved in that I really kind of started having some flashbacks where I would go to bed and wake up thinking I was right back in there, or something would happen and it would trigger off something. So I started realizing, man, I'm having some mental health, issues, that I actually started going to therapy and started reaching out and asking for help. And that's what, we really need to do is if we're struggling, we just really need to open up and have that conversation flowing. So if you need the help, you can get the help. It's okay not to be okay. We just can't stay that way. And that's what we need to continue to do is figure that way where we don't have to stay that way. But know that if we are not okay, that's okay as well. So now I'm going to, digress a little bit and tell you about a young lady, that really is when mental health really impacted me, and it's my daughter Brianna. She was born down in Key West on a great day. I mean, it was one of those days that we were excited. We weren't expecting her. She wasn't ready to come out yet, but she decided she was ready to come out and hit the ground running. I think when we got to the hospital, we gave 2 contractions. Here comes Brianna across the table that I had to deliver. The doctors weren't set up. The nurses were scrambling around trying to get the trays and everything ready and the tables and stirrups and all that. Well, Brianna wasn't ready. And that's how Brianna stayed her entire life. She always was moving. She was always laughing. She was always trying to make people laugh. She always wanted to help people. A good example of that is we were in the store and we were shopping, grocery shopping, and go and turn around and I can't find Brianna anywhere. She's missing. And I start freaking out. I'm like, man, what kind of father am I? I can't find my daughter. I walk over to the next aisle and here she is. She's helping push the cart of an elderly couple as she's picking out their groceries and loading it up. So of course I walk over, kind of realized what was going on. Said, all right, you keep doing what you're doing. I'll finish shopping. I'll meet you up front. So I finish shopping, go outside. Here comes Brianna pushing the cart out, load the groceries up, gets in our car, and we drive home. That's the kind of person, Brianna was. But when she was 6 years old, me and my ex split up. And she went to live in another state. I stayed back in Pennsylvania. And during that time of the separation and going through the divorce and figuring out what's going on, the next steps, there was some abuse that happened to Brianna. And a lot of people knew about the abuse was going on. She was being vocal about it. But unfortunately, nothing was being done to stop it at the time. And she was getting getting blamed for it or being told that she's a liar. So Brianna really kind of started pulling back and just kind of bottling up all that emotion and all that thought that she didn't think that she could really tell anybody. It wasn't until several years later, I was down at a conference in Florida, and Brianna calls me up one day and says, "Hey, can I move in with you?" I was like, "Absolutely." And I was down in Florida at the time, so we were trying to work out the logistics and how she was going to get up with all her stuff and all that. And she's like, "Well, I'm going up to New York, so once I'm up there, I'll go back home and I'll load my stuff up and then I'll come back up." I said, "Brianna, you're driving right through York. Why don't you just come here, stay, bring what you can, and we will go out and get you what else you need. If you need new clothes, bed, whatever, we'll go get it." So within a week of the first call asking to move in, Brianna moved in with me. So we got her enrolled in school. You know, she started getting friends, started really doing very well, you know, and she was happy. She had friends over all the time that I jokingly say all the time. She was trying to burn down my kitchen because they were always cooking food. To the point one time Brianna tried to cook pizza, and I was in my office, and all of a sudden I hear a whole bunch of banging around, and then Brianna's asking, "Dad, I need your help." So I said, "Hold on a minute." It's like, "No, Dad, I need it now." So I come out of the office, and there she is with the door to the oven wide open, and the pizza's in the oven, but it's upside down. So all the stuff from a Supreme Pizza is now falling down on the gas burners. So she wasn't allowed to cook for a while. I had to kind of ease her back into it. Had to start with microwave mac and cheese, but then she was able to make some pizza and other meals again. But the whole time she just really was focused on making everybody else good, making sure they were okay. It wasn't until when she was in 8th grade, I went to get in my car to go to a friend's house. And as I get in the garage, I'm getting ready to back up. I look over, and there's a ladder and an extension cord laying on the ground. So I look over, and I'm like, "I'm pretty sure I put that away. Maybe I didn't." Doing a bunch of projects, hanging stuff up. Maybe I just forgot to put it away, and I backed out and left. A couple hours later, I came home, go up to my recliner, and I sit down, and right on the end table, there was a little note, and it just said, "Dad." So I opened it up and read it, and it was a cry for help. It was not a suicide note, but it was a note spelling out everything that was going on, that she really did not want to live, but in the same time, she didn't want to hurt herself. So she really wanted someone to listen and someone to help her. So I went upstairs, woke her up, brought her down, and we started talking about it. I called her mom, and we decided to take her for the first time to the hospital to crisis intervention. So as we were in crisis intervention for a couple weeks, we really started learning about the abuse that was going on. At that time, I had no idea about the abuse. I was never informed about it. But I found out some other family members knew about it, but really never did anything. Brianna was angry at the family members. Was angry at me for not doing anything about it. She's like, "Why isn't my dad doing anything to protect me? He's a former law enforcement officer. He should be the one standing up that I can count on." So she never felt that she had anybody in her corner. It wasn't until a couple of weeks later, where she was in there, that she started realizing, wait a minute, my dad really didn't know about it, and now I have law enforcement here to interview me and take a statement and all that. And she got released, and she was doing good. And that went on for a couple of months. And she got out in October because she was all happy. She could go to her Gigi and Pop-Ups and do Halloween, which is something she loved doing. But then February, we went back into the hospital for the second time, and that's when we started learning even more of the issues and more of her having the flashbacks and, you know, the PTSD and just the not self-esteem, and there's some bullying going on in school, and family members are still, you know, kind of telling her that she's at fault and she's wrong about things. And, you know, we really started getting that bond, and during that 3 weeks is the time that me and her relationship completely bonded. I mean, she understood I was her rock. I mean, I was the one that if she needed to say anything to, talk to, she could come to me at any time. If she needed the help, we would go get the help. I mean, it did not matter. You know, so unfortunately there was, you know, a couple more times. I mean, this went on for a couple years. You know, things would go really good, and then things would go south again. You know, and she was cutting herself still. She was finding different ways to get things to cut herself. I had pretty much everything in the house locked up. I had alarm sensors on every door. I had motion detectors set up just so I could, you know, check movement. Camera set up. My gun safe all had alarm sensors and everything on it. Knives were locked up. Kitchen knives were locked up. Razors were locked up. But unfortunately, she was finding other ways to get things by going to other people's houses, you know, or, you know, going to the store and she would just buy some. I mean, she had a whole bunch of different ways, and, you know, but we started to learn, or I started to learn, when she was doing it, you know, and when it was happening. She would be up in her shower, and I'd be downstairs, and I would just always listen, you know, and there would be a loud thud, you know, upstairs, and, you know, I started learning that was the time she was upstairs, and she would be cutting herself, and that was her way to alleviate the pain. So I would go upstairs, sit outside her door, and we would just talk until she came out, you know, and sometimes it would be about absolutely nothing, you know, but it was something that would get her mind off of it and knew somebody was there on her side. You know, so that went on for, you know, several months. Actually, about a year and a half. She went in the hospital again for the third time, came out. Each time we thought it was good. You know, each time we thought it was going in the right direction. And each time she also learned different resources that were available and coping mechanisms and other things to kind of get through. And she was breaking off friendships with some friends that were not being, you know, the best thing for her, you know, at the time, because they were saying some things, you know. And then the fourth time she went in the hospital was in September of 2020, right at the end. And it was one of those days that she came home from school, and she was happy, you know, because, I mean, I say come home from school, they got off the Zoom calls because they were all doing the Zoom stuff at that time, but she was in a good spirit, you know. She comes down out of her room, and I'm sitting at my desk, and she goes, "Dad, I need to go to the hospital. I don't want to live anymore." I said, "Okay." Backed away, went to the hospital, and she went in for an inpatient again for another couple weeks, you know, and she got out again October. And we thought that one was the ticket. I mean, she came home with a whole new look on life and different resources again. But the one thing she really wanted was that emotional support animal. You know, she really wanted a dog. I mean, even though she stole my dog Mila, you know, she really wanted a dog of her own that she could raise, she could nourish, she could take wherever she was going. So when she had her panic attacks and all that, she would have something to comfort. So lucky, a couple of our friends, they have 3 kids, 4 kids, 3 are triplets, and they got 2 dogs, 2 puppies. So I think it was a little too much for them. I think they're extremely happy that Brianna fell in love with one of the dogs, Emma. So Thanksgiving night, we actually brought Emma home. And Brianna was absolutely ecstatic about it. She was so ecstatic that she forgot to bring out the deviled eggs for her pop-up that she made for him that day. So that week, I mean, it was great. She was happy. She was having friends over. She was showing Emma off, and she was saying, I have that purpose. I'm good. I'm happy. And I mean, it was great because, John came up. I mean, they were doing the schoolwork. So John came up from North Carolina, and he was staying with me for, a couple months doing the Zoom work, and he just came up. So he was up there for a holiday. He was going to stay through till Christmas. So, I mean, we couldn't ask for anything better. We had a great Thanksgiving, getting ready to have a good Christmas. That Saturday we hung up the Christmas tree. Brianna had the final say where all the ornaments went, and hung everything up. Then December 3rd came around. John and Brianna were downstairs, and they were doing schoolwork on the couch, and they were doing normal brother and sister, kind of arguing back and forth a little bit about absolutely nothing, but that's what brothers and sisters, do. I went in, I was doing some work upstairs, and John comes upstairs, goes in Brianna's room, where John's stuff was, and a couple minutes later, we hear a loud bang. We really had no idea what it was. I was in the bathroom, and I hear John yelling downstairs. I'm yelling downstairs. Don't hear anything. Don't get a response. And I'm coming out of the bathroom, and John goes downstairs, and he comes immediately running right back up and says, "Dad, I see smoke." So I'm thinking, oh, what did Emma chew? She just chewed the tree. Did a cabinet fall? Did something catch on fire? What's going on? So I go flying down the steps, and I really don't think I hit any step going down. So I go through the living room, and I come around the corner, and as soon as I turn around the corner, I find Brianna laying on the ground, passed away. Somehow she figured out how to get into my gun safe at that point, and used one of my old service weapons. I walked right up to her, and unfortunately, being former law enforcement, there was absolutely nothing that could be done. She was gone at that point. So I grabbed John, and we got out of the house, and we're on the phone with 911 trying to get them to come out. Law enforcement starts showing up, and they do what they got to do, and those officers were great. I can't repay them enough for, what they did to help us at that time. It was one of the lowest times of my life, and the compassion that they showed, I can't repay them enough. I mean, they were doing a bunch of different things to make sure I was okay, making sure John was okay, both physically and mentally, at that time. And it was when Brianna's body had to be removed from the house for the last time, they just asked me, "Hey, let's go take a walk." And there was a field next to, my townhome, and we went and just walked out in there away from it. And I knew what they were doing. I knew what was coming. I mean, the coroner just arrived. So I finally turned around and just thanked them. I said, "Thank you guys for doing what you're doing. I know what you're doing." But then how do we bounce back from that? I just lost my 15-year-old daughter to suicide because she felt that it was not okay. And how do you move forward? I had no idea. I never thought I was going to bury my daughter. any one of my kids. You know, but I knew at that point I could not live in that house anymore. I couldn't be in there alone by myself without horrible thoughts running through my head. So I enlisted some help from a whole bunch of people to come over and really help me kind of pack the house up, you know, clean it up and get it where I can move somewhere else. And, you know, I had no idea what I was doing. I couldn't even think straight half the time. And I remember the challenge of was packing up Brianna's room. You know, and we were up there and we were just opening up drawers, and we were finding note after note written in there that she had hidden in spots I never even thought to look for. But she had notes, and they were all just spelling out everything that was going on, you know, in her life, that she couldn't believe family would treat her the way that they did. People at school would treat her the way that they did. That people would do this to somebody that they supposedly love, you know. And it kept on going on, just reading these over and over again. And just some of the repeat message that she was being told is that she was fat and that she was ugly, that she was an attention getter, you know. And the one that really hit me hard was they told her to put a gun against her head and pull the trigger. Why? Why are we saying that to people in the community when they're reaching out for help that needs to change? That's when I decided something needs to happen. When I started reading those notes, I said, we need to get something together to help those that need help. We need to build the bridge for the people that need help, that can give help. And we had no idea what that was going to be. You know, it wasn't until I started cleaning her closet that I found a shirt that Brianna made in 8th grade that had the most simple message on it that turned into be our motto, you know, and something that we share nonstop, and it's Brianna's message. And it just said, keep fighting. I believe in you. You are a star. And I remember just sitting there on the floor as I'm packing things up. All my friends were there, and they were just kind of following my lead because they were all trying to help me out as well. And I looked at them and I said, that's it. We need to do something. And this is going to be the message that we're going to keep sharing and get it out there. But again, we had no idea what that was going to look like. So we started talking and we said, let's do a little memorial event. Let's do a mental health event. And that's where we came up with the name Building Bridges for Brianna, is again to build that bridge between the people that need help and the people that can give help. And we just started brainstorming. So Brianna passed away on December 3rd, 2020. December 27th, 2020, we actually formed the initial Building Bridges for Brianna. And it was 6, 7 of us that got together that all had similar experiences with mental health or has lost somebody to suicide over the years. And we all wanted to do something to let the community know that they're not alone and it's okay not to be okay. We just can't stay that way. So we started planning our first year event, which happened on June the following year, 2021. And again, we thought it was just going to be a small event. And we ended up having 1,500 to 2,000 people that showed out, you know, for that event. We had a motorcycle ride. We had live entertainment. We had raffles, vendors, mental health organizations, law enforcement. Everybody was there. And you couldn't go anywhere without talking about mental health. People were openly and actively talking about it throughout the entire day. And I said, man, this is awesome. This is what the community needs. You know, so I get home after a long day at the park. We're cleaning it up. And I spent another hour and a half on Facebook answering messages with people thanking us and just saying, hey, I didn't realize I had a mental health issue, but after hearing stories and talking to people, I need to talk to somebody. And I went to XYZ organization that was there, and they got an appointment scheduled, and they're getting the help, and they're going to get seen in the next couple weeks. I said, man, this is great. And I looked at the team that helped put this on. I said, that's it. This can't be a simple event. This needs to be a movement, and we need to continue this. So we started planning other events and other organizations and tried to figure out how can we help as best as we can, you know, and how can we provide the community the support that it needs. So we started bringing some people on as board members, you know, to kind of really understand, okay, yeah, we're raising some funds at these events. How do we now give back to, you know, the community? You know, so we started, you know, paying for some co-pays. You know, if people cannot afford their insurance, we'll pay for it. They need therapy, we'll pay for it. We've paid for rent for some people that realized, man, my only way out is to end my life because I can't get back on track because I can't get my rent taken care of. So we will help out with that. We'll pay for organization stuff. We will pay for art supplies. We will, whatever somebody needs, medication, we will help them because we want them to know that they're not alone in their fight. We are behind them 110%. We also started a support group for parents, you know, that have a family member that is dealing with mental health. And it doesn't have to be necessarily parents. It can be brothers, sisters, grandparents, aunts, uncles, anybody that has somebody else in their family dealing with mental health. Come on, come to the support group. We'll talk about it. It's peer-led, and we just bounce ideas and we share resources. You know, then last year in March, we actually decided to found our own nonprofit. We have partnered with another organization for the first year and a half. You know, as they were our incubator, they kind of started us off. They kind of let us use some resources, but then we became independent. You know, and now we're just expanding out into York County and trying to help out as much as we can, you know, with our events. And we just try to have those fun days in the park where we're just, here's some kid games, you know, here's some food, here's some live music, but let's not forget about mental health. You know, we have partnered with a lot of different organizations to really kind of, you know, promote the breaking the stigma around mental health. You know, and the one thing that I think is really important is we also help with the CIT training, you know, because officers are the first responders that are going to show up and deal with somebody most of the time that's dealing with a mental health. So if we can get them CIT trained, they know how to react. They know how to help that person and get them help. You know, so we'll help fund those trainings and get the lunches for those. And I've been going there and speaking at the training after the first year. And there's a lot of different programs. And then we also do the Light Bulb Initiative in September, which I bring that up because I always think, was that enough? And is that impactful enough to the community by just changing a simple light bulb? But the first year that we put it up, we actually had somebody that was following us on Facebook, knew what the purple light bulb meant, and they were on their way to end their life. They drove past a friend of mine's house that had the light bulb that was a CIT trained officer, and he knew what to do. The person stopped, went, knocked on the door, and asked for help. He didn't want to die. He just wanted help. But we got him the help that he needs. So I started realizing, man, the little things that we can do as a community can impact everybody. You know, this organization is behind everybody. We cannot do it alone. It takes a strong community foundation to build the bridge for mental health. And that's what we're doing together. And I thank each and every one of you for viewing our page, for coming to our events, to help break this stigma, to let people know it's okay not to be okay. We just can't stay that way, just so they have the ability to keep fighting. because we need to believe in them, because they are a star. And that's what we need to continue going forward, is helping those people. So I appreciate everybody watching. I hope you understand a little bit more about Building Bridges for Brianna and myself, of why we do what we do. If we can help that one person, we are doing our job. And then we just move on to the next, and move on to the next, and keep going. We are making tremendous headway in mental health, but we have a long way to go. And we need each and every one of you to keep us going and help us bring up that fight against mental health. So again, thank you, and stay tuned for future Bridge Talk episodes.